These are your notes on surface area of triangular prisms. Once again, surface area is going to be measured in square units. What that means is if you could literally cover your object in little tiny squares, whatever you're measuring in, you could actually count the number of squares, and that would be your surface area. If you ever bought gift wrap, and on the inside of the gift wrap there's little squares to help you, I assume, to cut straight lines, that could actually help you to do the surface area of an object, as you could wrap your object inside out on the paper and then count the number of squares. So if you don't have anything better to do, you can do that with your time. Anyway, so let's take a look at your surface area of triangular prism notes. First, we're going to look at what is the three-dimensional name of this object. Well, obviously, if these are triangular prisms, the three-dimensional name is going to be a triangular prism. So why is it a triangular prism? Well, it is a triangular prism because it has two triangular bases and the rest of the sides are rectangles. So what is the base shape? Because the first name in my prism is triangular, that means that the base shape is a triangle. And again, because it is a prism, that means that it has two of those bases. So there are two triangles in my triangular prism. So what is the area of the triangles? And notice that is plural. So to find the area of one triangle, I would do base times height divided by 2. Remember, to find base and height of a triangle, you always look for that 90-degree angle mark, which is right there. So on this one, it's 8 times 6 divided by 2, which gives me an area of 24. But remember, because it said triangles, that means that there are two of them. So I'm going to take my answer and multiply by 2, and that gives me an area of 48. So now I'm going to look at my other faces of my triangular prism. So let's take a look at this back triangle. I'm going to color it in green so that makes it a little bit easier to see. So because it is a rectangle, it would be length times width, and on this one I see that it is 8 for the length. But the question is, what is the width? This is the width, which this is the same thing as this, which is the same thing as this little dotted line. Although they're a little disoriented because of the way that the shape is, just to show the three-dimensional part of it. But that means that my width is going to be 4. So 8 times 4 gives me an answer of 32. So let's take a look at another part of the rectangle. So pick up a different color pencil, and I'm going to do this front face here. So I notice on this one I have 10, that's going to be my length times width. So 10, and then once again we have 4. So 10 times 4 gives me an area of 40. The last one is this little part on the side, and it doesn't necessarily look like a rectangle, but you have to keep in mind that based on the fact that it's a triangular prism, that means that side has to be a rectangle. So I notice it's going to be this, which is 6. And notice here we go, we have 4. So I want to point out something that we're going to notice a little bit later, is that we have the 4 that is repeated here. And we have to think about what is 4 when it comes to my triangular prism. We'll come back to that thought. So total surface area of your triangular prism, I'm going to add up these dimensions. So 48 is the area of my triangles. 32 was one rectangle, 40 was the other rectangle, and 24 was my third rectangle. And that gives me a total of 144. I need to look at my picture to see that it is feet, and again it's going to be squared, which is that little 2. So number 2, what I've actually done on number 2 is it's the same thing as number 1, but what I've done is I've taken the net of number 1 and laid it out so that we can kind of see that it's the same thing. So this is the net of the same shape. So it's still going to be a triangular prism. The base is still going to be a triangle, and there are still going to be two bases. So what is the area of the triangles? Once again, it's triangles. So here is my right angle. So 6 times 8 would be base times height. 6 times 8, 8 times 6 doesn't matter. That gives me 24. But once again, I have 2 of them. So if this is 24 and that's 24, I'm just going to multiply that by 2. And that gives me an area of 48. So now, this time, instead of breaking it down like I did up above with all my different rectangles, what I'm going to do is look at this as one big rectangle. So if you want to take your colored pencils and color that, that may make it a little bit easier to see. So remember, this is the same triangular prism that we had up above. It's just instead of looking at these as 3 separate rectangles, I'm going to look at it as one big rectangle. So I know the area of a rectangle is length times width. So here I need to find the length of my rectangle. So I have to notice that if this is 6, when my two shapes come together to make a three-dimensional thing, that means this is also going to be 6. If this is 8, this is 8. And this is going to be the same thing as this, because again, once they wrap up to make that three-dimensional object, this side would match with this side, which gives me 10. So I would have to do 6 plus 8, which is 14, plus 10, which gives me 24. So the length of that is going to be 24 times the width of this rectangle is the same thing as this, which is 4, which gives me 96. So now all I have to do is 48 plus 96, which gives me an area of 144 feet squared. So what I would like to focus on is this big rectangle when it comes to the formula for surface area of a triangular prism. So notice on both of them we had to first find the area of 2 triangles. So I think 2 triangles. So to find 2 triangles, I'm going to do 2 times my formula for a triangle, which is base times height divided by 2. Then I had 3 rectangles. But remember, you could take those 3 rectangles and put them together to make one big rectangle. And remember, to find the length of that big rectangle, what I had to do was add up these 3 numbers. Well, notice those 3 numbers are the same numbers that go around the edge of your triangle. If you go around the edge of your triangle, that is called the perimeter of your triangle. So it's going to be 2 triangles plus the perimeter of the triangle times, and remember the width this time was 4, but we're going to call that the height, because the height is what connects your one triangle to your other triangle, or your 2 bases together. So plus, and in order to do perimeter of the triangle, I'm going to use 3 separate variables. I'm going to do x plus y plus z times the height of my prism. And I'm actually going to use a big H on this one because I don't want to confuse this H with this H. This H is the height of my triangle. This H is the height of my prism. So remember, it's 2 triangles plus a rectangle, one big rectangle, but to find the area of the rectangle, you had to do the perimeter of the triangle times the height. If you want to, you can clean up this formula, and notice if you multiply something by 2, but then divide it by 2, you can do just base times height. And if you can remember that this is all 3 sides of your triangle, you can also abbreviate that as big P times H. So you can also use the formula BH plus PH, but remember you need to know what each of those stands for. B is the base of the triangle, H is the height of the triangle, P is the perimeter of the triangle, and this H is the height of the prism. So saying all that, use your formula and pause the video and try your U-tries using your formula, or again you can just break it down into your sides and add all your sides together. So number 1, I found that the base and height of my triangle were 8 and 7, and then the perimeter of my triangle was 8, 8, and 8. So that means this was an equilateral triangle. And 12 was the height of my prism, because again, 12 is what connects my 2 triangles together. I find the total surface area to be 344 square centimeters. Number 2, the base and height of my triangle was 5 and 6. Once again, this was an equilateral triangle, and the height of my prism was 9. So I got a total surface area of 192 square inches. On number 3, my base and height of my triangle make that 90-degree angle, so 8 and 12 divided by 2. And then the perimeter of my triangle was 8 feet, 12 feet, and 14.4 feet, because that's the same as this. And the height was 9. So I had to do all of this, multiply it by 9, and I find a total surface area of 405.6 square feet. And those are your notes on surface area of triangular prisms.